Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into a very powerful and emotional moment in international politics. Sweden has finally had enough of Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. This moment marks a turning point in Europe's attitude toward Russian aggression, and Sweden's voice has now become one of the strongest in calling for Russia to get out of Ukraine once and for all. This is not just a statement, it's a reflection of how far Sweden has come from its historic neutrality to becoming one of the most vocal defenders of freedom, democracy, and territorial sovereignty in Europe. In recent months, Sweden's tone toward Russia has hardened dramatically. For decades, Sweden stayed away from military alliances, maintaining a position of neutrality even through the Cold War. But the invasion of Ukraine changed everything. The images of destroyed cities, the suffering of civilians, and the constant disregard for international law pushed Sweden to take a stand. Now, Swedish leaders are saying clearly that enough is enough. Russia must withdraw its forces and respect Ukraine's independence. This shift didn't happen overnight. It's been building for years as Russia's behavior grew more aggressive. From the annexation of Crimea in 2014 to cyber attacks and disinformation campaigns targeting European countries, Sweden, like many others, realized that staying silent only encouraged more aggression. So when the full-scale invasion began in 2022, the Swedish government, public and media all rallied behind Ukraine. It became clear that this was no longer just Ukraine's war. It was a fight for the future of Europe itself. Sweden's leaders have spoken out strongly at international forums, condemning Moscow's brutality and demanding accountability for war crimes. They have called out the Russian government for violating every principle of international order, from sovereignty to human rights. The Swedish foreign minister recently stated that Russia's actions are not just attacks on Ukraine, but attacks on the rules that keep the world stable. And this statement echoes across Europe. If Russia can get away with destroying one country, then no one's borders are safe. Sweden has also backed up its words with concrete actions. The country has provided humanitarian aid, military equipment, and financial support to Ukraine. It has imposed sanctions on Russian entities and individuals, frozen assets, and joined global efforts to isolate Russia economically. But perhaps the most dramatic decision was Sweden's choice to abandon its long-standing military neutrality and apply for NATO membership. That was a massive step and a clear message to Moscow. Sweden will no longer stand alone in the face of aggression. This move was historic. For over 200 years, Sweden stayed out of military alliances. But the moment Russian troops crossed into Ukraine, Swedish society collectively said enough. Polls showed overwhelming support for joining NATO, something that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. It's proof of how deeply the war has changed the mindset of ordinary Swedes, who now see security not as a national issue, but as a collective European responsibility. The message Sweden is sending is crystal clear. Peace cannot be achieved by appeasing bullies. The only way to stop aggression is to confront it. The Swedish Prime Minister said recently that Ukraine is fighting for the same values that define Sweden: democracy, freedom, and justice. Supporting Ukraine, therefore, isn't charity. It's self-defense for Europe's future. Meanwhile, Russia has responded with anger, threatening Sweden with consequences and military countermeasures. But those threats have only strengthened Sweden's resolve. The people of Sweden have seen how Russia uses intimidation as a weapon, and they've decided they won't be scared into silence. Instead, Sweden has doubled down on its support for Ukraine and increased its cooperation with NATO allies. This determination is visible everywhere in Swedish politics and media. The country's newspapers publish daily updates on the war, analysts discuss strategies to counter Russian influence, and ordinary citizens raise money to help Ukrainian refugees. The public's empathy and awareness are remarkable. Sweden, a country that once avoided military entanglements, is now standing at the forefront of defending European security. But this new position didn't come without internal debates. Some politicians and citizens initially worried that joining NATO or confronting Russia could make Sweden a target. However, as the war dragged on and Russian atrocities continued, those fears transformed into a sense of moral duty. People began to understand that neutrality in the face of evil is not peace, it's complicity. That realization united Sweden like never before. Now, Sweden's military is modernizing rapidly. It's investing in advanced defense systems, increasing cooperation with. Sweden's foreign policy is now deeply intertwined with the defense of democracy. It's no longer just about protecting its borders, but about standing for principles that define Europe's identity. The Swedish public supports this approach wholeheartedly. Surveys show that the majority of Swedes believe that supporting Ukraine is not only the right thing to do morally, but also strategically essential for long-term peace in the region. The transformation of Sweden's role in the world is extraordinary. A nation that once relied on diplomacy and neutrality now finds itself preparing for collective defense, contributing to European deterrence, and standing as a symbol of moral strength. Sweden's message is being heard far beyond Europe. From Washington to Tokyo, nations are recognizing that this is a defining moment in global history. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has united the democratic world in ways the Kremlin never expected. Countries like Sweden, once cautious and reserved in their diplomacy, are now on the front lines of political and moral leadership. Their voices carry weight because they come from nations that understand both the cost of war and the price of freedom. The Swedish government has also emphasized the need for long-term support for Ukraine. It's not just about sending weapons, it's about rebuilding institutions, supporting refugees, and helping Ukraine move closer to European integration. Sweden has been one of the strongest advocates for Ukraine's EU membership, seeing it as the ultimate guarantee of stability and prosperity in Eastern Europe. Meanwhile, Moscow continues to try to intimidate Sweden with threats and propaganda, but those efforts are failing. Sweden's intelligence agencies have strengthened their cyber defenses, exposing Russian disinformation campaigns and educating the public about how to identify fake news. The Swedish people have become more aware of how Russia tries to manipulate narratives, and they've responded with resilience and truth. At the same time, Sweden's cultural and humanitarian contributions have been immense. Swedish organizations have provided shelter, food, and medical care to thousands of Ukrainian refugees. Schools and universities have opened programs to help displaced students and academics continue their education. These acts of kindness have strengthened the bond between Swedes and Ukrainians, creating a sense of shared struggle and solidarity. In the bigger picture, Sweden's message to Russia is not just political, it's moral. It's about saying that nations cannot simply rewrite borders by force, that human life cannot be treated as expendable, and that freedom cannot be silenced by bombs. Every word Sweden speaks now carries the weight of history and conviction. As the war continues, Sweden's role will only grow. Its entry into NATO marks a new era, one where Sweden contributes directly to collective defense and deterrence. The Baltic Sea is becoming a strategic focus, and Sweden's military and intelligence capabilities will be key to ensuring stability in that region. This cooperation will make it much harder for Russia to threaten its neighbors. In Parliament, Swedish lawmakers continue to approve new aid packages for Ukraine, reaffirming that their support is unwavering. Political parties from across the spectrum, left and right, have united on this issue, showing that defending democracy is not about ideology, it's about humanity. This unity is one of Sweden's greatest strengths. The message from Stockholm to Moscow could not be clearer. The world will not accept occupation, war crimes, or lies. Russia must get out of Ukraine and allow the people of Ukraine to decide their own future. Sweden's voice adds moral authority to that demand, and it resonates because it comes from a nation that has always valued peace, but now understands that peace requires strength. Every speech, every aid shipment, every diplomatic action from Sweden now carries the same spirit, a commitment to justice. The world is changing, and Sweden is showing what it means to adapt with integrity. While the war continues, Sweden remains steadfast, standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine and sending one unified message: enough is enough. The story of Sweden's transformation from neutrality to leadership is one of courage and conviction. It shows that even small nations can make a huge difference when they stand for what's right. Sweden's call for Russia to get out of Ukraine is not just a headline, it's a declaration of values that define the 21st century. And as the world watches, Sweden's actions remind us all that democracy, freedom, and justice are worth defending, no matter the cost. The world is changing, alliances are shifting, and history is being written right now. Sweden's voice is part of that history, echoing the simple but powerful truth: aggression cannot stand, and freedom will always rise again. That's the essence of this moment. A nation that once stayed silent now speaks with power. Sweden has had enough, and its message to Russia is clear: get out of Ukraine, respect international law, and end this senseless war. Until that day comes, Sweden will stand firm, side by side with Ukraine, defending the values that keep the world free.